I'm Jessica Crawford, 28 years old, and 3 days before my wedding, I found a note from my parents that shattered everything. Wedding's off. Expect a call from my lawyer. We've taken matters into our own hands. My stomach dropped as I read those cold words. After years of trying to please my controlling parents while building my own life with Tyler, they had finally gone too far. The perfect wedding they insisted on funding had become their weapon against me. I stood in our family home clutching that note, knowing I wouldn't argue or fight back. I had no idea that within 48 hours, everything would change in ways I never imagined. Before I dive into this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below, and please hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up against family pressure for someone you love. Growing up as the only child of Richard and Eleanor Crawford meant being raised with both privilege and pressure. Our family had wealth going back 3 generations, with my father running a successful investment firm and my mother maintaining our social connections in Boston's elite circles. From an early age, I understood that my future had been mapped out: attend an Ivy League school, pursue a respectable career, and eventually marry someone from a suitable family with the right background, connections, and bank account. While I did attend Brown University as they wished, I developed a passion for interior design rather than business or law as they had hoped. After graduation, I surprised them by refusing a position at my father's firm and instead joined a boutique interior design studio. Over the next 6 years, I worked my way up to become a senior designer with my own impressive client list. My parents eventually accepted my career choice, especially when they saw I was successful, but they never stopped viewing it as a temporary diversion before I settled into a proper marriage. Their vision of my future husband was always clear: someone from our social circle, preferably with an MBA from Harvard or Yale, working in finance or law, and from a family they could brag about at their country club. That's why Tyler Williams immediately failed their test when I introduced him 2 years ago. I met Tyler at a charity fundraiser for arts education in public schools. While I was there as a donor, Tyler was being recognized for his work as a high school art teacher who had developed an innovative program connecting disadvantaged students with professional artists. The moment he stepped on stage to accept the award, I was struck by his genuine passion and humility. He spoke without notes, from the heart, about how art had saved him as a teenager and how he wanted to create that same opportunity for his students. At the reception afterward, I introduced myself, and we ended up talking for hours. Tyler grew up in a middle-class family in Western Massachusetts, his father a plumber and his mother a nurse. He worked through college on scholarships and student loans, eventually earning his master's in education. There was nothing pretentious about him, just authentic warmth, intelligence, and a contagious enthusiasm for his work. Our first date was nothing like the formal dinners I'd become accustomed to with previous boyfriends my parents approved of. Tyler took me to an interactive art exhibit created by his students, followed by dinner at a small family-owned restaurant where he knew the owners by name. For the first time, I felt completely comfortable being myself, without monitoring my words or behavior to meet someone else's expectations. Over the next few months, our relationship deepened quickly. We shared values about what truly matters in life, even if our backgrounds were different. 6 months ago, during a weekend trip to Cape Cod, Tyler proposed with a simple but beautiful ring that had belonged to his grandmother. Without hesitation, I said yes. When I called my parents to share the news, their response was lukewarm at best. "That's wonderful, dear," my mother said with an unmistakable pause. "We should all have dinner soon to discuss the plans." That dinner became the first battleground in what would become a war over our wedding. My parents insisted on hosting and paying for an elaborate wedding at the Rosewood Estate, one of the most exclusive venues in New England. "It's what the Crawford family does," my father stated as if reciting a natural law. 300 guests minimum. Full orchestra. Top caterer. When I suggested a smaller, more intimate ceremony that better reflected Tyler and me, they acted as if I'd suggested getting married in a fast food restaurant. "What will people think?" my mother asked, genuinely distressed. The Harrington's daughter had 600 guests at her wedding last year. Tyler, wanting to make peace, suggested we compromise. It's important to Jessica that you're happy with the wedding, he told my parents. Maybe we can find middle ground. Over the following weeks, I found myself in a constant tug-of-war between my vision and my parents. I won some battles, choosing my own dress rather than the designer my mother preferred, selecting a menu that included comfort food stations alongside the formal dinner. But I lost others. The guest list ballooned to 250 people, many of whom were my parents' business associates and social connections I barely knew. Tyler tried to remain positive, but I could see his discomfort growing as the wedding budget increased to astronomical figures. "Are you sure this is what you want?" he asked one night after my parents insisted on hiring a celebrity photographer who had shot for Vogue. "I want us to be married," I answered honestly. "And I want my parents' blessing. I'm hoping if I compromise on the wedding, they'll eventually accept you and respect our relationship." Looking back, I was naive to think an extravagant wedding would solve the fundamental issue. My parents didn't believe Tyler was good enough for me, and no amount of floral arrangements or champagne fountains would change that. As the wedding date approached, what should have been an exciting time became increasingly stressful. Each planning meeting with my mother turned into a subtle criticism session about Tyler's family or background. "Will his parents know which fork to use at dinner?" she asked once, not even attempting to disguise her snobbery. "Perhaps we should print special instruction cards for certain guests." My father was more direct in his disapproval. During a tasting session at the caterer, he pulled me aside while Tyler was chatting with the chef. "It's not too late to reconsider, Jessica," he said in a low voice. "Brandon Whitfield has been asking about you. His family's firm just merged with Goldman Sachs. He would be a much more suitable match." The tension came to a head during a dinner at my parents' home 3 months before the wedding. My mother had invited Tyler's parents, ostensibly to get better acquainted. Marion and Robert Williams were warm, genuine people who had raised 3 children on a modest income but had given them a home rich in love and support. Throughout the evening, my parents made subtle but unmistakable remarks highlighting the differences in our backgrounds. "We've been members at the Oakmont Country Club for 4 generations," my father mentioned casually. "Where do you golf, Robert?" Tyler's father smiled politely. "I'm afraid between work and coaching Little League all those years, I never picked up the game." My mother's contribution was equally pointed. "The wedding venue has been featured in Architectural Digest 3 times. We've had our Christmas parties there for years. I imagine it's quite different from the places you typically frequent." I watched Tyler maintain his composure, responding with grace to each thinly veiled insult. His parents, too, remained remarkably dignified. But I could see the hurt in their eyes, and my resentment toward my parents grew with each passing minute. After dinner, when the Williams had left, I confronted my parents. "How could you be so rude? They were nothing but kind, and you treated them like they were beneath you." "We were perfectly civil," my mother replied, genuinely bewildered by my anger. "But surely you see the problem, Jessica. These people aren't from our world. Every interaction will be awkward. Every family gathering a strain. Is that really what you want for the next 40 years? What I want is to marry the man I love and for my family to support me," I replied, my voice shaking. "Tyler is kind, intelligent, and makes me happier than I've ever been. Why isn't that enough for you?" My father's expression hardened. "Because marriage isn't just about feelings, Jessica. It's about building the right alliances, maintaining a certain standard of living. Has Tyler mentioned a prenuptial agreement yet?" "What?" "No, and we don't need one." "Absolutely unacceptable," my father declared. "No daughter of mine is getting married without proper financial protection. I'll have my lawyers draw up the paperwork tomorrow." That was the line I refused to cross. "No. I won't ask Tyler to sign a prenup. It would suggest I don't trust him, and I do completely." My parents exchanged glances loaded with meaning. "Then we may need to reconsider our involvement in this wedding," my father said coolly. "Fine," I responded, surprising even myself with my firmness. "Tyler and I will pay for the wedding ourselves. We'll scale back and have something we can afford." The threat of me taking control seemed to startle them. After a tense silence, my mother said, "Let's not be hasty. We'll continue as planned, but this discussion isn't over." They reluctantly backed down, but the atmosphere remained frigid. That night, as I vented my frustration to Tyler over the phone, he suggested a solution I'd been secretly considering. "We could just elope," he said. "Fly to Hawaii, get married on the beach with just us and a couple of friends as witnesses. No drama, no power struggles." The idea was tempting. But despite everything, they're still my parents, I sighed. I've always imagined them at my wedding. I keep hoping they'll come around once they get to know you better. "Then we'll do this your way," Tyler assured me. "Just remember, at the end of the day, it's about us building a life together. Everything else is just decoration." We continued with the wedding plans, but I began noticing my parents having hushed conversations that would abruptly stop when I entered the room. Twice, I overheard the phrase "background check" and felt a chill run through me. "Are you investigating Tyler?" I confronted them one evening. My father looked offended. "Don't be ridiculous, Jessica. We're simply making sure all the wedding arrangements are properly vetted." I didn't believe him, but with only weeks until the wedding, I chose to focus on finalizing the details rather than fighting another battle I wasn't sure I could win. Looking back, that was my mistake, believing that my parents would respect my choice simply because I'd stood my ground. I underestimated just how far they would go to maintain control over my life. 1 week before our wedding, I returned home early for my final dress fitting. The alterations had been completed faster than expected, and I was in high spirits, finally feeling the excitement that had been overshadowed by family tension. Walking into my parents' house, where I'd been staying to facilitate last-minute wedding preparations, I heard voices coming from my father's home office. Thinking it might be the wedding planner, I approached the partially open door. "So there's nothing more substantial we can use?" I heard my father ask. A voice I didn't recognize replied, "The financial issues are mostly student loans, typical for someone in education. As for the relationship timeline, it's ambiguous enough that it depends how you interpret it." My mother's voice chimed in, but there was definitely overlap. That's what matters. My blood running cold, I pushed the door open fully. Inside, my parents sat across from a man in a gray suit, multiple folders spread across my father's desk along with photographs I couldn't clearly see. "What is this?" I demanded, though I already knew. The stranger quickly gathered the materials while my parents exchanged alarmed glances. My father recovered first, dismissing the man with a quick nod. After he left, my father tried to take control of the narrative. "Jessica, please understand, we're only looking out for your best interests. As your parents, we needed to be certain about the man you're planning to marry. You hired a private investigator?" The betrayal felt physical, like a blow to my chest. "How dare you invade Tyler's privacy and mine this way?" My mother attempted to justify their actions. "Darling, this is standard procedure for families in our position. Your great-aunt Beatrice had a complete dossier compiled on your father before they allowed their engagement to proceed. This isn't the 1950s, Mother, and I'm not asking for your permission to get married. I'm an adult making my own choice about my life partner." My father's expression hardened. "A choice you may be making without all the relevant information. Tyler Williams is not who you think he is." "What are you talking about?" "For one thing, he's in significant debt," my father stated. I laughed incredulously. "You mean his student loans?" "He's told me all about them. We've discussed our finances openly, which is more than I can say for how you've approached this relationship." "It's not just that," my mother interjected. "Jessica, he was seeing another woman when you first started dating." The accusation hit me like a bucket of ice water. "That's not true. Tyler would have told me." My father pulled a photograph from one of the folders and handed it to me. It showed Tyler with his arm around a blonde woman, both smiling at the camera. "This was taken 3 weeks after your first date. Her name is Allison Parker. They dated for almost a year before he met you." I stared at the photo, mind racing to make sense of this new information. Tyler had mentioned an ex-girlfriend named Allison, but he'd said their relationship had ended before we met. "There's more," my mother said, her voice gentler now that they'd landed a blow. They attended her brother's wedding together while you and Tyler were already dating. They showed me more photos. Tyler in a suit at what appeared to be a wedding reception, the same woman by his side. The timestamp showed a date about 3 weeks after Tyler and I had met. I left my parents' house in a daze, the photographs tucked into my purse. Rather than confronting Tyler immediately, I drove around for hours, trying to process my feelings. Tyler had always been so honest and straightforward. It seemed impossible he would hide something like this from me. Yet the evidence seemed clear. That evening, when Tyler came over to my apartment, I placed the photos on the coffee table without saying a word. His face fell as he recognized them. "Where did you get these?" "My parents hired someone to investigate you," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "They showed me these today. You told me you and Allison broke up before you met me." Tyler sat heavily on the couch, running his hands through his hair. "Jess, it wasn't like that." "Yes, technically Allison and I were still seeing each other when I first met you, but we were already in the process of breaking up. We'd been having problems for months." "So you were dating us both at the same time?" The thought made me nauseous. "No, I mean there was a brief overlap, but nothing inappropriate happened. After I met you at that fundraiser, I knew something special was happening between us. I ended things with Allison officially the next week." "Then why are you at a wedding with her 3 weeks after our first date?" Tyler looked pained. "Her brother was one of my closest friends from college. I'd RSVP'd to that wedding months in advance, and Allison and I agreed to attend together as friends to avoid drama at her brother's wedding. I should have told you about it, but it felt like ancient history by the time we got serious, and honestly, I was afraid you'd misinterpret it exactly the way you are now." Part of me wanted to believe him immediately. His explanation made logical sense, and the timeline matched what I knew about the early days of our relationship. We hadn't been exclusive right away. We'd only had 2 dates before the date on those wedding photos. But another part of me felt deeply hurt that he'd kept this from me. "You should have told me, Tyler. Finding out from my parents like this, it makes it seem like you were hiding something worse." "I know," he admitted. "I made a mistake by not being completely transparent. But Jessica, I promise you there was no cheating, no betrayal. By our 3rd date, Allison and I were completely done, and I was already falling for you. I needed space to think. I believe your explanation, but I'm still upset you weren't honest with me. I think I need some time alone tonight." Tyler looked devastated but nodded. "I understand. Just please know that I love you, and there's nothing else I've kept from you. Your parents are trying to find any reason to break us up. Please don't let them succeed over something that happened 2 years ago, before we were even really together." After Tyler left, I called my friend Amber and asked if I could stay at her place for a day or 2. I needed neutral territory to sort through my feelings, away from both Tyler's earnest explanations and my parents' manipulations. Amber welcomed me, without judgment. "Whatever you decide, I'm here for you," she assured me. Over the next 2 days, my parents called constantly, leaving voicemails urging me to cancel the wedding. "It's not too late to back out gracefully," my mother insisted. "People will understand. We can issue a statement about mutual differences." I let their calls go to voicemail while I reflected on my relationship with Tyler. In 2 years together, he had never given me any reason to doubt his honesty or commitment. He'd been patient with my parents' coldness, supportive of my career, and loving through all our challenges. Was I really going to throw away our future over an unclear situation from the very beginning of our relationship, especially when my parents had gone to such underhanded lengths to expose it? By the 3rd day, I had made my decision. I trusted Tyler. His explanation made sense, and while I wished he'd told me earlier, I understood why he hadn't. Our relationship was built on something real, and I wouldn't let my parents' interference destroy it. 3 days before our wedding, having resolved to move forward with Tyler, I returned to my parents' house to collect the items I needed for the wedding and the honeymoon. I had expected another confrontation, prepared my arguments about trust and forgiveness, but the house was eerily quiet when I arrived.
"Mom? Dad?"
I called out, receiving no answer. Their cars were gone from the driveway. On the entryway table, Propped against a vase of fresh-cut roses from our garden was a cream-colored envelope with my name written in my mother's elegant handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of their personal stationery with a message that stopped my heart. Weddings OFF. Expect a call from my lawyer. We've taken matters into our own hands. My first thought was that this must be some kind of extreme scare tactic, my parents' last-ditch effort to make me reconsider. With shaking hands, I called Tyler. They've left me a note saying the wedding is off. I told him, my voice trembling despite my efforts to stay calm. They mentioned lawyers and taking matters into their own hands. Have you heard anything? Nothing, Tyler replied, sounding concerned. What do you think they mean? I don't know. I'm trying to call them now, but their phones are going straight to voicemail. Over the next hour, a horrifying picture began to emerge. I called our wedding planner to ask if my parents had been in contact with her. Oh, Jessica, she said, her voice filled with awkward sympathy. I was going to call you today. Your father contacted me yesterday to cancel all the arrangements. He said there was a family emergency and the wedding needed to be postponed indefinitely. He's already paid the cancellation fees. He did what? I nearly screamed into the phone. He had no right to do that. I'm so sorry, she replied. Since he was the one who signed the contracts and paid the deposits. One by one, I called our vendors, the caterer, the florist, the photographer, and received the same response. My parents had systematically canceled every service for our wedding. But the worst was yet to come. The venue coordinator sounded genuinely regretful. Your father not only canceled, Ms. Crawford. He made it clear that if we worked with you directly to reinstate the event, his law firm would find a way to make things extremely difficult for us. Given your family's connections, we can't afford to get on their bad side. I sank onto the stairs in the foyer, feeling physically ill. My parents hadn't just withdrawn their support, they had actively sabotaged our wedding, using their wealth and influence as weapons. Tyler arrived at the house 30 minutes later, his face tight with concern. When I showed him the note and explained what I discovered, I expected anger, perhaps suggestions that we pursue legal action of our own. Instead, he sat beside me on the stairs and took my hands in his. Jessica, I'm so sorry they've done this to you, he said gently. But listen to me, this doesn't change anything about us. We still have each other. We can still get married, maybe not in 3 days and not with 250 guests, but we can figure this out. His calm in the face of this crisis steadied me. I won't let them control my life this way, I said, finding my resolve. I won't argue with them or fight about the money they've spent. That's what they want, for me to beg and negotiate. But this is our wedding, our life. If they don't want to be part of it, that's their choice. Tyler helped me gather my belongings, my wedding dress, the honeymoon luggage I'd already packed, personal items I didn't want to leave behind. As we carried everything out to his car, I took one last look at the house where I'd grown up, feeling a profound sense of loss but also a strange liberation. For the first time, I was choosing my own path without seeking my parents' approval. We drove to Tyler's apartment, which would soon be our shared home. Once we had brought everything inside, the emotional weight of the day finally caught up with me. I collapsed onto his couch and burst into tears, not delicate, dignified tears, but ugly, wrenching sobs that came from the deepest part of me. Tyler held me without trying to stop my crying, understanding that I needed to release the pain and betrayal. Let it all out, he murmured, stroking my hair. I'm here. We're going to get through this together. When I could finally speak again, I looked up at him with swollen eyes. What are we going to do about the wedding? Everything's canceled. Everyone's been told it's not happening. Before Tyler could answer, my phone rang. It was Amber. Jessica? What the hell is going on? Your mother just called me saying the wedding is canceled because you found out something terrible about Tyler. She was very vague but implied he'd been unfaithful or something. I told her that sounded like complete bullshit, but I wanted to check on you. I explained the situation, including my parents' investigation and their unilateral decision to cancel everything. Those manipulative monsters, Amber said, her loyalty warming my heart. Listen, we're not letting them win. I'll start calling everyone on your side of the guest list right now. Tyler can contact his people. We'll explain there's been a family dispute, but the wedding is absolutely still happening. We just need to figure out where. After I hung up, Tyler looked at me questioningly. Is that what you want? To still try to have the wedding this weekend? I thought about it for a moment. Yes, I said firmly. Not because I'm in a hurry, but because I won't let them dictate our lives this way. It won't be what we originally planned, but maybe that's better. Something smaller, more authentic to us. Tyler smiled, the relief evident on his face. I like that idea. Actually, I've always thought the big production wasn't really you anyway. It wasn't, I admitted. I got caught up in trying to please my parents, thinking if they saw how happy I was, they'd eventually accept you. I was wrong. We spent the evening making calls, explaining the situation to friends without going into hurtful details, and exploring alternative venues that might be available on short notice. Tyler's mother immediately offered their backyard for the ceremony. Several friends volunteered to help with food, decorations, and music. By midnight, exhausted but determined, we had the beginnings of a new plan. It wouldn't be the elaborate society wedding my parents had envisioned, but it would be genuine and filled with people who truly supported us. As we finally went to bed, I felt a strange mixture of heartbreak and hope, devastated by my parents' betrayal but strengthened by the knowledge that Tyler and I were facing this challenge united. What I didn't know then was that the next 48 hours would bring developments I could never have anticipated. The next morning, just as I was making coffee in Tyler's kitchen, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Jessica Crawford? This is Jonathan Blackwell from Blackwell, Stern and Associates. I represent your parents, Richard and Eleanor Crawford. I'm calling to discuss the legal implications of your current situation. My hands tightened around the phone. What legal implications? I'm an adult choosing to get married. There's nothing to discuss. The lawyer's voice remained professionally detached. I'm afraid it's not that simple, Miss Crawford. Your parents have instructed me to inform you that they are taking steps to protect family assets. The trust fund established for you has conditions regarding marriage that you may not be aware of. What conditions? I've never been told about any conditions. My trust fund had been established by my grandparents when I was born, set to fully mature when I turned 30 or when I got married, whichever came first. There's a clause allowing the trustees, your parents, to withhold distribution if the marriage is deemed unsuitable. He paused delicately. Additionally, any wedding gifts or preparations purchased with family funds are legally considered family property and must be returned. My anger flared. That's ridiculous. You can't possibly enforce something like that. We're also filing for a temporary restraining order preventing you from accessing the family vacation properties, business interests, and certain heirloom items until this matter is resolved. The conversation continued for several more minutes, with the lawyer outlining increasingly outrageous demands and restrictions. By the time I hung up, I was shaking with a combination of rage and disbelief. Tyler, who had been watching my expression darken throughout the call, gently took the phone from my hand. What's happening? They're trying to cut me off financially, I explained, my voice hollow. Threatening to withhold my trust fund, demanding the return of wedding gifts, blocking me from family properties. It's like they're treating me like a rebellious teenager instead of a 28-year-old woman. Tyler's face paled slightly. Jessica, I never wanted to come between you and your family, especially not financially. Maybe we should postpone the wedding, give everyone time to calm down. No, I interrupted firmly. That's exactly what they want. They think if they threaten my financial security, I'll fall in line. But I don't care about the money, Tyler. I care about us. Though I meant what I said, I also knew we needed legal advice of our own. Later that morning, I called Marcus Goldstein, a lawyer I'd met through my work who specialized in family law. He agreed to see us immediately. Marcus's office was a stark contrast to what I imagined my parents' high-powered legal team worked in, small, cluttered with books, and decorated with children's artwork. But his reputation was excellent, and more importantly, he had no connections to my parents' social circle. After listening to our story, including the details about the trust fund, Marcus leaned back in his chair with a thoughtful expression. Your parents are bluffing, at least about the trust fund. I need to see the exact language. But trusts established by grandparents typically can't be modified with new conditions after the fact. If there was no morality clause or approval requirement in the original trust documents, they can't add one now. A weight lifted from my shoulders. So they can't actually withhold my trust fund? Almost certainly not. As for the wedding gifts and preparations, if they were explicitly presented as gifts to you, they're legally yours, regardless of who paid for them. The restraining order regarding properties depends on ownership structure, but it's likely just another intimidation tactic. Tyler, who had been quiet during much of the consultation, finally spoke up. What should we do next? Marcus smiled. First, don't panic. Second, I'll request copies of all the relevant documents, trust agreements, property deeds, anything that establishes Jessica's legal rights. Third, and most importantly, proceed with your lives as you see fit. Getting married is a legal right that your parents can't interfere with. As we left Marcus's office, my phone began buzzing with notifications. Friends were messaging about strange calls they'd received from my mother, asking probing questions about Tyler, and suggesting the wedding was canceled due to concerning information about him. They're trying to turn my friends against you, I said in disbelief as I scrolled through the messages. Most of my close friends, like Amber, had seen through the manipulation. But some acquaintances and more distant social connections were already sending politely worded messages expressing understanding about the difficult decision and hoping I was taking care of myself during this challenging time. It hurt to see how quickly some people accepted my parents' version of events without even checking with me. But it was also clarifying, showing me who my true friends were and who was merely part of the social network my parents had cultivated. The unexpected silver lining through all of this was Tyler's family. When we called to update them on the situation, their support was immediate and unconditional. Those people have no idea what they're throwing away, Tyler's mother Marion said firmly. You're welcome in our family exactly as you are, Jessica. No conditions, no expectations. His father Robert immediately offered practical help. I've got a buddy who's a justice of the peace. If you need someone to officiate on short notice, he'll be there. Tyler's sister Rachel called shortly after with another offer. I still have all the decorations from my wedding last year. Lights, table settings, everything. It's yours if you want it. The contrast between my family's rejection and the Williams family's embrace couldn't have been more stark. Tyler's family had limited financial resources compared to mine, but they gave freely of what they had, their time, their connections, their unwavering support. As the day progressed, we continued making alternative arrangements for a smaller wedding. Some vendors, upon hearing our story directly from us, agreed to work with us despite my parents' threats, particularly those who had no previous business connections with my family. By evening, local news outlets had somehow gotten wind of the drama. A reporter called asking for comment on what they described as a high-society wedding cancellation amid allegations of impropriety. I declined to comment, but the fact that the story had reached the media added another layer of stress. Tyler found me staring at my phone later that night, scrolling through more messages from friends reporting my mother's calls. We could still postpone, he offered gently. Get married in a few months when all this has died down. I looked up at him, seeing the concern in his eyes, not for himself, but for me. In that moment, I loved him more than ever for his willingness to put my well-being first. No, I said, taking his hand. My parents are counting on wearing us down, making this so uncomfortable that we give in. I won't let them win that way. We're getting married this weekend, even if it's just us, a justice of the peace, and Amber taking pictures on her phone. Tyler smiled, squeezing my hand. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. But for what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice. Sometimes you have to show people you can't be manipulated before they'll start treating you with respect. As we prepared for bed in what would soon be our shared apartment, I wondered what the next day would bring. My parents still hadn't contacted me directly, working instead through their lawyer and by trying to influence my friends. I had no idea what other tactics they might employ, or how far they would go to stop this wedding. What I didn't expect was the ally who would emerge the next morning, someone who would completely change the dynamic of this family standoff. Exactly 48 hours after finding my parents' note, I was sitting at Tyler's kitchen table making lists of what we would need for our scaled-down wedding when the doorbell rang. Tyler, who had gone out to pick up breakfast, wasn't due back yet, so I approached the door cautiously, half expecting to find another lawyer, or perhaps even my parents themselves. Instead, I opened the door to find my grandmother Margaret standing there, her silver hair perfectly styled as always, wearing one of her trademark tailored suits. "Grandma?" I said in shock. My father's mother lived primarily in New York and rarely visited Boston without advance notice. At 82, she still maintained an active social calendar and served on multiple charitable boards. "Hello, dear," she said calmly. "May I come in? I believe we have matters to discuss." Still stunned, I stepped aside to let her enter. Grandmother Margaret had always been kind to me, but she was also a formidable woman who had navigated Boston's high society for decades with grace and steel. I had no idea which side of this family dispute she would take. She surveyed Tyler's modest apartment with interest rather than judgment. "So this is where you'll be living? It has good bones. Excellent light in this room." "Grandma," I said, finding my voice. "How did you know I was here? Did my parents send you?" She laughed, a surprisingly youthful sound from such an elegant older woman. "Your parents have no idea I'm here. In fact, they'd be quite upset if they knew." She settled herself on Tyler's couch and patted the space beside her. "Sit down, Jessica. I think it's time you heard some family history." I sat, bracing myself for whatever was coming. Grandmother Margaret took both my hands in hers, her grip surprisingly strong. "First, let me say that I am deeply disappointed in how your parents have handled this situation. Their behavior is shameful and does not reflect the values I thought I had instilled in your father." Relief washed over me. "Then you don't agree with what they're doing?" "Certainly not. But I'm not entirely surprised either. You see, Jessica, history is repeating itself in our family. 60 years ago, I was in a position very similar to yours." This was news to me. I'd always known my grandparents as the perfect society couple, their marriage apparently arranged from within their social circle. "Your grandfather Harrison came from the right family, attended the right schools, and moved in the right circles," Grandmother continued. "But he wasn't my first choice. Before him, I fell in love with a young architect named Daniel. Brilliant, creative, from a middle-class family in Philadelphia. My parents were horrified." "What happened?" I asked, fascinated by this revelation. "My parents did exactly what Richard and Eleanor are doing to you. They threatened to cut me off, canceled my engagement party, and spread rumors about Daniel's character. And I—" She paused, a flash of old regret crossing her face. "I gave in. I broke things off with Daniel and married Harrison 3 months later." "Were you unhappy with Grandpa?" "I had always seen them as content together. Harrison and I built a good life. We developed respect and affection for each other over time. But I never felt with him what you clearly feel for Tyler, that spark, that sense of true partnership. I don't want you to make the same compromise I did, especially not because of pressure from your parents." She reached into her handbag and pulled out an envelope. "Which brings me to why I'm here. Your parents seem to have forgotten who established that trust fund they're threatening to withhold." I looked at her in confusion. "I thought my grandparents on both sides contributed to it." "Indeed we did. And while your mother's parents are no longer with us, I am very much alive and still a co-trustee. I've spent the morning with my lawyer reviewing the documents. Your parents have absolutely no legal right to withhold your trust based on their disapproval of your marriage. None whatsoever." She handed me the envelope. "This is a letter from my attorney confirming your rights to the trust, regardless of whom you marry. I've also instructed him to proceed with a transfer of your portion of the trust to accounts solely in your name, which should have been done when you got engaged anyway." I stared at the envelope, hardly able to believe what I was hearing. "Grandma, I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything, dear. But that's not all I've done this morning. A small, satisfied smile played at her lips. I've also had some conversations with the management at the Rosewood estate and several of your vendors. It seems my name still carries some weight in this town, particularly with people who appreciate the charitable donations I've made to their children's education funds over the years. The doorbell rang again, and this time it was a courier with an envelope addressed to me. I opened it to find a letter from the Rosewood estate. Dear M.S. Crawford, we are pleased to confirm that your wedding reservation for this Saturday has been reinstated as originally planned. We apologize for any confusion and look forward to hosting your special day. Sincerely, the management, Grandma, I gasped. How did you do this? Her eyes twinkled. Let's just say I reminded certain people that the Crawford family name doesn't belong exclusively to your parents, and that my influence extends to areas they might not have considered. More importantly, I pointed out that bowing to intimidation tactics sets a terrible precedent for any business. Throughout the morning, similar messages arrived from the caterer, the florist, and other vendors, all confirming that our original arrangements had been reinstated. My phone began buzzing with calls from friends who had received new information clarifying that the wedding was indeed proceeding as planned. When Tyler returned and I introduced him to my grandmother, she studied him with keen eyes before nodding approvingly. I can see why Jessica chose you. You have integrity in your face, young man. Tyler, who had heard enough about the formidable Margaret Crawford to be slightly nervous, relaxed visibly at her acceptance. Thank you for supporting us, Mrs. Crawford. It means more than I can say. Call me Margaret, she replied warmly. And I haven't done anything extraordinary. I've simply ensured that my granddaughter can make her own choices, as every adult should be allowed to do. Over lunch, Grandmother shared more about her own experience and offered wisdom about navigating family conflict. Your parents are acting from fear, she explained. Fear that you're rejecting their values, fear of change, fear of losing control. It doesn't excuse their behavior, but understanding it might help you find a path forward eventually. Do you think they'll ever accept Tyler? I asked, voicing my deepest concern. Time will tell. Your parents are stubborn, but they do love you in their way. Once they see they can't control your choices, they'll have to decide whether their pride is worth losing their daughter. As afternoon approached, Grandmother prepared to leave. I've arranged to stay at the Four Seasons until after the wedding, she informed us. I assume I'm still invited? Of course, I said, hugging her tightly. Would you consider walking me down the aisle? Since my father won't be there? Tears glistened in her eyes, the first time I'd ever seen my composed grandmother cry. It would be my greatest honor, Jessica. After she left, Tyler and I sat in stunned silence for several minutes. I can't believe everything that's happened in the past 2 days, I finally said. From thinking our wedding was completely ruined to having it all put back together again. Tyler squeezed my hand. Your grandmother is amazing. Definitely see where you get your strength from, and it's not from your parents. As we resumed wedding preparations with renewed energy, I reflected on the unexpected gift my parents' interference had ultimately given us, clarity about what truly mattered and who truly supported us. The wedding would proceed with or without my parents, and while their absence would leave a hole in my heart, it would also remind me that I had chosen authenticity over approval, just as my grandmother wished she had done 60 years ago. Saturday morning dawned clear and perfect, the kind of crisp autumn day that photographers dream about for outdoor wedding photos. As I prepared in one of the Rosewood estate's elegant suites, surrounded by Amber and my bridesmaids, there was a surreal quality to the moment. After the emotional roller coaster of the past week, it seemed almost miraculous that we were here, proceeding with our wedding as planned. My parents had maintained their silence, neither responding to the news that the wedding was back on nor making any further legal threats. Their absence created a bittersweet undercurrent to the day, but I refused to let it overshadow my happiness. You look absolutely beautiful, Amber said as she helped adjust my veil. I'd chosen a simpler dress than my mother had originally pushed for, an elegant A-line gown with delicate lace detailing rather than the princess ball gown dripping with crystals that would have better suited my mother's vision. I feel, right, I replied, studying my reflection. Like I'm truly myself today. A knock at the door revealed my grandmother, resplendent in a silver-blue ensemble that complemented her eyes. "It's almost time, dear," she said, her voice steady but her eyes bright with emotion. As the music began and we prepared to walk down the aisle, grandmother took my arm. "Remember," she whispered, "you're not losing a family today. You're expanding one." The ceremony was more moving than I could have imagined. Standing before our guests, a smaller group than originally planned but filled with people who truly cared about us, I felt a certainty I hadn't expected given the chaos of the previous days. Tyler's vows brought tears to my eyes. "Jessica, when we met, I never imagined someone like you would choose someone like me. These past days have tested us in ways neither of us anticipated, but they've only strengthened my certainty that you are the strongest, most determined woman I've ever known. I promise to stand beside you through whatever life brings, to support your dreams as you've supported mine, and to remember always that when we face challenges together, we can overcome anything." My own vows, rewritten the night before to acknowledge our journey, came straight from my heart. "Tyler, I choose you, freely, completely, and without reservation." Recent events have shown me that love isn't about meeting others' expectations or following predetermined paths. It's about recognizing the person who brings out your best self and building a life that reflects your shared values. I promise to remember this lesson through all our years together, to face life's challenges with the same courage and integrity you've shown, and to never take for granted the precious gift of choosing our own path. As we exchanged rings, I glanced at the seats where my parents should have been. Instead of emptiness, I found my grandmother, her presence a reminder that family is defined by love and support, not merely by blood. The reception was filled with genuine joy, lacking some of the extravagant touches my mother had planned, but somehow more meaningful for being slightly scaled back. Tyler's family mingled easily with my friends, creating new connections that felt natural and unforced. During the toasts, my grandmother rose to speak, commanding the room's attention without raising her voice. "Marriage," she began, "is not merely a social arrangement or an economic partnership, though many in our circles have treated it as such for generations. True marriage is a covenant between two people who see in each other not what society values, but what genuinely matters: character, compassion, and commitment. Jessica and Tyler have demonstrated all three qualities, not just in their relationship with each other, but in how they've handled the obstacles placed in their path. May their union remind us all that the most valuable family traditions are not those that restrict us to narrow paths, but those that give us the courage to forge our own." Her words seemed to hang in the air, a gentle rebuke to the values my parents had prioritized, and a blessing on the new family Tyler and I were creating. As the evening progressed, I received an unexpected message, a formal note delivered by courier. The handwriting was my mother's, the message brief and cold. "We stand by our position that this marriage is a mistake. When you're ready to discuss this rationally, you know how to reach us." Mother and father, no congratulations, no well wishes, just a reaffirmation of their disapproval. I showed the note to Tyler, who simply folded it and put it away. "They'll either come around or they won't," he said gently. "Either way, we'll be okay." In that moment, surrounded by people who genuinely celebrated our happiness, my parents' absence hurt less than I might have expected. Their rejection was their choice, and for the first time, I fully accepted that I couldn't control their reactions, only my own. The weeks following our wedding brought both challenges and unexpected developments. True to her word, my grandmother ensured my trust fund was transferred to accounts in my name alone. Tyler and I moved forward with our lives, settling into our apartment and returning to our respective careers. About a month after the wedding, I received a text from my father, the first direct communication since the note. "Your mother and I would like to meet for lunch next week. Just to talk." The meeting was tense and awkward. My parents made no apologies for their behavior, but seemed to be testing whether reconciliation was possible. I set clear boundaries. "I love you both, but I will not tolerate any disrespect toward Tyler or his family. If you want to be part of our lives, you need to accept my choice of husband." My father, ever the businessman, seemed to approach the situation as a negotiation. "We may not agree with your decision, Jessica, but we recognize it's been made. Perhaps we can find a workable arrangement." It wasn't the warm embrace of Tyler I'd hoped for, but it was a start. Over the following months, our relationship slowly began to thaw. My parents made stilted efforts to be civil to Tyler, who responded with more grace than they deserved. The first dinner with both families was an exercise in polite restraint, with my grandmother acting as a buffer between the still disapproving Crawfords and the understandably wary Williams family. The true turning point came 6 months after our wedding. Tyler's art program received a prestigious grant, and his work was featured in a national education magazine. My father, reading the article, made his first genuinely positive comment about my husband. "He seems quite dedicated to his students." That's admirable. It was a small acknowledgement, but it represented a shift in perspective, the beginning of seeing Tyler as a person of value rather than an unsuitable match. Building a healthy relationship with my parents remains a work in progress. There are still moments of tension, still occasions when old patterns emerge. But I've learned to maintain firm boundaries while leaving the door open for growth and change. The experience transformed me in ways I never expected. The people-pleaser who had tried for years to balance her own desires with her parents' expectations was replaced by a woman who understood her own worth and the importance of making choices based on authentic values rather than external approval. My relationship with Tyler deepened through the crisis we weathered together. Facing such significant opposition before we even married gave us confidence that we could handle whatever challenges life might bring. His steadfast support through the conflict showed me the true meaning of partnership in ways theoretical discussions never could. Perhaps most surprisingly, I developed a new appreciation for family legacy, not the superficial version my parents had tried to enforce, but the deeper values my grandmother embodied: courage, integrity, and the wisdom to recognize what truly matters in life. As I reflect on our journey, I'm grateful for the crisis that nearly derailed our wedding. Without that challenge, I might never have discovered my own strength or fully appreciated the genuine support system we had built. I might have continued seeking my parents' approval rather than finding my own path. The note my parents left me, "Wedding's off. Expect a call from my lawyer," was intended to control and manipulate. Instead, it became the catalyst for my liberation from patterns that had constrained me for years. Those 48 hours between finding the note and my grandmother's intervention were among the most painful of my life, but they led to a clarity and confidence I might otherwise never have found. To anyone facing similar family pressures or trying to balance personal authenticity with family expectations, I would say this: stand firm for what matters most to you. The path may be difficult, the conflicts painful, but the freedom to build a life based on your true values is worth every moment of struggle. Thank you for listening to my story. I'd love to know if you've ever had to stand up to family pressure for someone or something you believed in. How did you handle it, and what did you learn from the experience? Please share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. And remember, sometimes the most painful notes can lead to the most beautiful symphonies. You just have to be brave enough to play your own music.